The challenge is called Strive Beyond Silence, Arctic to Aegean, and it's a trek to put mental health on the map. I'm aiming to become the first ever person to walk the length of Europe. It's the first continuous solo trek of its kind.
That really is the pit of despair. That is as low as you could have got. How have you got to be this version of Kit?
First time probably since I was 11, genuinely not feeling alone. I could always feel alone in a room full of 200 people. The biggest thing that these people had that I wanted was honesty and truth.
I want to know how much you think the creativity has almost, by being stifled and being suppressed and being so lonely, is now almost like a cork out of a bottle.
I think I was in that room for less than 5 minutes before he said, I think we're going to do an ADHD assessment. It was pretty much a perfect score of ADHD. And I left that, everything made sense, everything.
The way you have just articulated that whole journey is more powerful than anything Tim ever taught me, and he's the best at what he does. I've heard you talk before, and you took my breath away then. You've just done it again. So, Kit, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. It really is. And the perspective I know that you're going to bring into this episode is, I'm really excited about it. And I know we've talked about this off camera, haven't we?
I've been feeding off your enthusiasm and having talked for minutes before camera. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait. And like we said, it's a lived experience that empowers and inspires and helps anyone watching.
Yeah. That feels great to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Bless you. To open up, how would you describe you?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think I'm just who was Kit? Just a being in this sort of human flesh suit that is living a human experience, and I guess just trying to do her best in a world where I don't know what's going on half the time, like most of us. And I think, that's probably who I am.
You use the word just there. Mm-hmm. If we could edit that out, we can't, but we won't. But if we could edit that out, you're not just. You're amazing. And to define that amazing, I just want to talk about, go straight to the challenge, and then we'll come back from there if that's okay. Because I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the perspective of your challenge, what it is and why you're doing it, because then that people will understand why the word just should not live in a description of Kit.
Too humble.
Fair? Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. Yeah. So what's the challenge?
So the challenge is called Strive Beyond Silence, Arctic to Aegean, and it's a trek to put mental health on the map. And I'm aiming to become the first ever person to walk the length of Europe, starting from Nordkapp, Norway, the northernmost point, to a tiny island off Greece called Gavdos. So it's about much more than that. It's 850,000 kilometres more, because I don't know my left and rights and I'll probably get lost.
On your own? Yeah.
So it's solo, unsupported. It's the first continuous solo trek of its kind. So I need to do the whole thing by myself, but I'm allowed to have people joining me at different stages. And I'm aiming to do it in under 365 days. But it's not really just about wanting to do a world record. It's more about the meaning behind it. So Strive Beyond Silence is because I want to make some serious noise around suicide prevention and support for those struggling with their mental health. I've advocated for mental health for years on social media, and I've had amazing responses to that, and I felt very overwhelmed in a really beautiful way by how many people have related to my story. But I've just got to the stage where I don't think I can keep on just talking about it to see the change that I want to see, because we're still losing so many lives. It's like 750,000 lives a year are lost to suicide worldwide, and it's the second biggest killer of people worldwide. And in the UK, under 35 is the biggest killer, and under 50 in men it's the biggest killer. So, it can be prevented with the correct intervention, the direction of where to go, the realization that you don't have to feel guilt or shame about feeling this way. But my biggest thing is, for the last decade we've been talking about mental health really in a more public light, but it's kind of saying it's okay to speak up and ask for help which is amazing and so needed. But people are speaking up and asking for help and getting closed doors because there is not capacity to save people because we don't have the correct resources. So hopefully I can raise lots of money for charities that do the work, because like they do save lives. There is the correct people out there, support networks and groups like that. And yeah, ultimately I don't want anybody to go through what I went through for 15 years of feeling like I was alone or misunderstood, or no one else felt like me. So I'm really hoping that this track can do that.
So powerful. Is there, if you could take back to some of the challenges you've clearly been through to be pushing yourself to do this huge challenge now, I'm talking personally, what have you gone through?
So I have had problems, or maybe not problems, I call it my darkness and light, because both are needed. So I don't like to demonize one or the other, but so I've had darkness in my life since I was 11, 12, starting with insomnia, and then depression and anxiety, and then self-harming, and then anorexia. And then I had anorexia for most of my teenage life. And then when I started to recover from anorexia, I started drinking because all my friends were, and it suddenly felt like, oh, this is such a breath of fresh air. Like I don't have to think. Yeah, I don't have to think, and I didn't really know who I was because I became such a shell of a human as an anorexic. And yeah, it was like a release. I could kind of be who I wanted to be, a bit more confident. And then I just got known as a party girl. And I think when you first start drinking, I was always someone who either had nothing or I went to oblivion. There was no in between. But you don't have any consequences to your actions, like a slight sore head, or maybe, oh, why did I fall off that table last night? Kind of embarrassment, but nothing big. And it just progressed. My drinking progressed, and then drugs progressed. And then I had a really traumatic event when I was 21, and I became an everyday drug user. And nobody knew what was happening. My mum and dad and my family were just like, she's just a nightmare. She's acting out, she's selfish, which I was, I was all of those things. And I just wasn't thinking. I was just on a warpath. And then I did kind of stop by myself because I didn't think I was an addict. I was like, well, maybe this game get out of hand. And I did that for 5 months, and I thought I was okay. But then I started drinking again, and then that slowly, very quickly actually, got very much out of hand. And then I was the drugs, and then I was actually standing. I had to move back in with my parents because I'd pushed my boyfriend at the time away, for good reason, because I was clearly an alcoholic and an addict, even though I couldn't admit that myself. So I moved back in with my parents. They saw what was happening, and then I was standing in the landing of my parents' house looking at my car, and my dad was in the boot of my car, which had all these empty bottles, like everything. And I was like, they're going to have an intervention. So I actually got in my car the next day and I ran away from home, and I didn't come back for about over a year. And my parents didn't know where I was and what I was doing, who I was with, if I was safe or not. And I lived in my car for a bit. That got broken into, then became homeless, then was living in bad places with other addicts. And it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. Then moved to the Hebrides, of all places. That was a whole thing. That was...
There's a movie here, right?
Yeah. Well, I went to Cornwall originally when I first ran away, and then I went up to the Hebrides. And I guess now I know what they're called in recovery. They're called geographicals, where you go somewhere and then you blow up that whole place and you think, God, everyone around here is awful. And then you go somewhere else and everything blows up and you go, but it's you can't outrun your own shadow, right? And if you're an addict, you're just, and during that year I was away. I tried to commit suicide multiple times. One time died on the spot and brought back to life. And the insanity just grew and grew and grew. And then I got to a stage where I didn't know where to go or where to turn. And I phoned my parents. And I was on actually a boat coming back to Oban. And my dad picked up, and he did everything in his power to get me home. Everything. I've got, just sort it out straight away, get you back home. And got back home to my parents and did not recognize me. Yeah, just totally awful. And it was during that time. That was April 2022. And over 2 months leading up to June, it was when I realised I was an addict. I didn't think I was an addict. I just thought bad things had happened in my life. And if you had my life, you would act like this. And that was sort of my escape, like shove my trauma in people's faces. This is what's happened to me. And
victim mindset.
100%. Yeah. And do you know what? Even when people then didn't feel sorry for me anymore, it was them making things up. It's the insanity that is created around addiction. It's the lies, the manipulation, the self-destruction, and living in this really scary place where you don't care if you live or don't care if you die. Mm-hmm. So you don't care about the consequences to your action. You're walking around in what feels like invincible because you don't care what happens to you, and you don't think you're going to see the consequences to your actions.
Hence being isolated and it being so selfish.
Yeah.
You've articulated that so well.
Yeah, I've heard you talk before when you came up and visited our offices, and you took my breath away then. You've just done it again. I think what I want to explore with you, hopefully sensitively, is that really is the pit of despair. That is as low as you could have got. How have you got to be this version of Kit, which you just never see them being the same person? So
inspiring.
It is, and without a shadow of a doubt, you inspire other people. So how have you gone from there? Of your dad getting you back off the ferry from Oban, and not the nuts and bolts of a car journey back down to Hampshire, but to being this amazing person that can articulate your struggles and journey. And somewhere in there, I'm presuming there's an ADHD diagnosis. And I'll later on, I'll be very keen to explore how that's played a part in your understanding. But wow, that's a journey and a half in itself, coming back.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
How have you done that?
Yeah, so it was between April 2022 and June 22 where I started to realise that I was an addict, because before I had access to it, and my parents, I didn't, and they knew what was going on, and they were hiding everything, and the insanity of when they left the house ripping things up. And I just knew, and they were scared for me, and they couldn't get any help for me through NHS services, and they couldn't leave me alone. They were so worried for my life. I was worried for my life. But I had a friend that I followed on Instagram. She always used to post milestones, like 18 months, 2 years. And so I reached out to her and said, "What is this?" And she said, "Oh, I'm clean from drugs." And I said, I think it might have a bit of a problem. And she said, "Okay, I'm going to take you to a meeting." But this wasn't instantly. I'd normally phone her quite a few times and then wake up the next day and think it was an awful idea. But eventually, she said, "Right, tomorrow I'm taking you to a meeting." So the next day I went to an online women's meeting, and I can't remember much of that meeting at all, but I remember crying loads, listening to other people, and leaving that meeting with 8 new numbers in my phone and one message that really stood out, which was pick up the phone, don't pick up a drug. So every time I wanted to pick up a drug, I picked up the phone and called someone. Hours on the phone to these women crying, saying I can't do it, and just being told just do it today. If you can get your head down on the pillow tonight, clean, just for today, you can do that, can't you? And so it was that mentality. And over a while, you build up a day, and then it's a week, and you kind of can't believe that you're living like this. And I went to other meetings and started to meet other people that were recovering addicts, and started to get clean. So I haven't touched a drug or a drink since June 2nd, 2022.
Well done, you.
Since that meeting. So that, working a 12-step program has been the absolute, it's the priority in my life every single day. If I don't prioritize that, I've got nothing else. If I don't stay clean, I've got nothing else.
We were talking off camera about the importance of, there's no doctor in the room in that environment. You were helping each other. You don't pick up a drug, pick up the phone. That's a community.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an element of the challenge that you're about to do that is now, weirdly compared to what you were doing, selfishly for you, to give yourself a challenge that you clearly relish, but also to then really want to give back to a community that's helped you?
100%. I think I went into these meetings thinking, okay, maybe they might be able to, I didn't believe they were going to help me get clean, because I didn't think anyone could or anything could. So that was a miracle in itself, being able to put down the drink and the drugs, as hard as it was, especially in the beginning stages. But what was amazing was going and hearing other people's stories and hearing other people, what they've been through, and admitting these crazy things that I'd done as well, these things that I thought I was going to have to take to my grave, and getting really humbled, being like, in the most beautiful way, you're not special or different. Your darkness does not make you special or different. You're not allowed to act the way you're acting, actually. You're not allowed to be selfish. You're not allowed to hurt others and hurt yourself further. So that got me thinking, okay, I need to actually stop being the victim here. So how can I stop being the victim and make my story one that's powerful? How, for me at the time, like, how can I actually help this bring me forward? Because if I was going to stay feeling sorry for myself, I wouldn't get anywhere. But yeah, that whole element of hearing other people, not feeling alone, for the first time probably since I was 11, genuinely not feeling alone. And I don't mean I could always feel alone in a room full of 200 people, like really not feeling alone. And then it just kind of made me think that the biggest thing that these people had that I wanted was honesty and truth, speaking truthfully and honestly about their lived experiences, what they'd been through, and the power behind that. Because if they can do it, it makes you think you can do it. And so that idea then was like, okay, I'm going to start sharing on social media, not just about being a recovering addict, but the other things involved that have been throughout my life, and started to get really shocked about people reaching out to me and how that affected people. And yeah, and also my first 30 days, I, for some reason, picked up a pen and a piece of paper and started writing poetry. And my poetry is basically a whole journey of from where I was to where I am today as well, and sharing those online, and other people seeing fragments of their stories, strangers on the internet, inside my words. And it was just like, this is amazing. And then, yeah, I guess with the diagnosis, it was probably 9 months into my recovery that I got diagnosed with ADHD. We were waiting for ages on NHS, but it just, the waiting list was 2.5, 3 years. So when I saw someone privately, and I think I was in that room for less than 5 minutes before he said, I think we're going to do an ADHD assessment. I couldn't sit down. I just constantly fidgeting, and just, it was pretty much a perfect score of ADHD. And I left that being, everything made sense, everything made sense from that point. At school being told that I was always away with the fairies, the multiple, problems with my mental health, which I know can be very much of a correlation with ADHD for a lot of people. And, just crazy ideas I always came up with, and the addiction, which, a lot of people with ADHD use drugs and alcohol as a way to boost up their dopamine as a self-medication. So that, and I felt really accepting of my ADHD. I actually was like, this makes sense, and I can actually really get this. And then a year later, I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and that was actually the hard one. But I have come fully to terms with that, and I think I'm all diagnosed up now. But
do you know, back in the day, 20 odd years ago, when I started working in this field, that was in my policing days. I worked with an amazing guy who I will reference in this program, Professor Tim Willins from America, on the correlation between ADHD and substance abuse. And he's an incredible academic. And all of his teachings, and we're still in touch, we see each other annually, all his teachings and all the work I did, the way you have just articulated that whole journey is more powerful than anything Tim ever taught me, and he's the best at what he does. You've got me with the way you can articulate your journey, and I could see that building up to your diagnosis. All the things you were saying that you had gone through, all of those things are out of a textbook, but they're your life. And I think the purpose of what we're trying to do here is get it out the textbook and get it onto the table, so that people don't have to go through what you've gone through alone. That feeling of being alone in a room full of 200 people. The earlier we can get the awareness, the people say don't label people, but the moment that doctor said to you, I think we're going to be working with an ADHD diagnosis. As you were telling that story, you watch it back when this comes out, your face changed in the way you told the story, because you were back, part of you was back to, I now understand something a bit more, I suspect. And your face did change, and darkness into light and all of that. And I think that's really powerful. And I look forward to watching that back, because as you told the tale, the poet in you changed the mood of the poem. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I've never thought of that before, but the way you articulated that story went from darkness to light. And I thought that was quite powerful.
And also being able to live with both.
Absolutely.
And I've obviously, before today, wanted to learn about you and go on your socials, because they're a force for good. But there's so much that you bring light from darkness, and you are very vocal about that. And of course, your word articulate. Even the Bluebell little video you did, where you go down to mouse level and talk about it from that creativity point of view. I want to know how much you think the creativity has almost, by being stifled and being suppressed and being so lonely, is now almost like a cork out of a bottle. Yeah. And I'm going to not try and use the word superpower, which can be thrown around as a label with ADHD, but you know what I mean? You went through so much darkness and so much troubled times, and one hell of a self-discovery journey, if you like, to now be really, really trying to put out positive messages, empower people, inspire people. Do you feel that? Do you feel like there's an element of like, you're sort of flourishing now?
Yeah.
Because you can feel that, right?
Yeah, you can. And as you asked that question, you said, yeah. I thought, oh, thank God. Honestly.
But did you doubt it?
I did doubt. No, I did doubt whether or not you were completely there. Because I think you're always going to have, I suspect there's always going to be the little Jiminy Cricket self-doubt, little bit of 100%. Don't believe it. Yeah.
The point is that the light is dominating.
Absolutely.
The you jump to the because you are surrounded by light.
And I think, though, like, the biggest tool for that is actually loving my darkness, because I know who I am in my darkness now. It doesn't scare me. And I think I've learned to grow and love and show just as much compassion for me in the dark as I do in the light, because I need both. Like, I couldn't just be light all the time. It'd be exhausting, and probably exhausting for everyone around me. Mrs. Positivity is quite draining after a while. But I think during this process and coming up to 3 years clean, I've done a deep dive in accepting. And what I found for all my life leading up to that point, I had this rucksack on my back. I call it this rucksack. And it was like, as the years passed, lies went in there, trauma went in there, manipulation went in there, and this rucksack just kept on filling up and up and up until my rock bottom, it completely flattened me. And I hated myself so much, couldn't look at myself in the mirror. And it was kind of no surprise, because I had this constant fear that I was going to get found out, this constant fear of who I was, basically, and what I'd done and everything like that. And these 3 years, I've been able to unpack that, and it's empty. And I, have admitted things that I never thought I would ever admit to people, and, apologize to people. And I look at myself in the mirror every morning now, and I like who's looking back. Not every day. You can't, it's always, it's a daily reprieve. We wake up every day and go, okay.
You built a good habit of doing that.
Yeah. And I think, my bipolar as well, like getting that diagnosis, and now I've accepted it. It's, that was a big part of love, because even though when I was in recovery, I was still getting suicidal quite regularly, and that's why I eventually got diagnosed with that. And at first I hated it, and everything I read up about it was my battle, my struggle with bipolar, which I hated. I thought, this is a chronic illness. Same with ADHD, same with being in recovery for addiction. To battle something for the rest of your life I don't think that sounds good. So for all of these things, ADHD, bipolar, my addiction, and just my general life, just welcome it in as a friend, let it sit beside you. Like, what are you going to teach me? Like, who are you? And the more you get to know someone, any friend, over the years, that grows deeper, and you go through roadblocks and you go through bumps, but that only makes that relationship stronger. And I think that has helped me, because I can't look at something as my enemy for all my life. If I befriend it, it gets less scary. And now I can kind of manage my bipolar and my ADHD with medication, but also with this, okay, come on in, you're having a bit of a moment. That's okay.
Your vulnerability is such a strength.
Yeah.
And just on strength, you walked in here with a rucksack that is
different
so
rucksack.
heavy. He's a strong man, right? And so you walked in and we didn't, nothing about it was going to demonstrate to us how actually heavy it is, and relevant to the challenge that because you're wearing this rucksack full of sand, training for a challenge that I can tell is of such personal importance to you, and to raise this, much needed money for charity. But something I've learned, particularly talking with Phil and other guests, is that sometimes that challenge that you set yourself can be at the detriment of your own personal well-being. So you're about to do something that's a new world record in a pretty hostile environment.
Yeah.
And I'm just interested in kind of how much of that personality that's been really hard on yourself, cruel to yourself, actually tried to end it, is now in a positive place, but will put potentially too much pressure on yourself, because you're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing this for so many people that you want to make a difference for. How are you managing that?
I actually think if I was doing this just for myself, I'd find it harder. I think the fact that I'm doing it for other people reinforces why I'm doing it. And I think that is actually going to be the biggest thing that's going to get me through. I mean, people that are contributing to my crowdfunder, getting their name on my tent, that's going to be amazing, because I'm going to wake up every day and see people's names and I'll be like, great, I'm doing it for Tim in Bournemouth or whatever it is, and it's just going to be like, okay, this is bigger than me. Because as soon as I get into my own head about it and doubting myself, that's where the problem breaks down. But as soon as I realize why I'm doing it, the message behind it, I'm like, okay, you've got this, because this is so much bigger than you. It's not about me. It's about, I keep on saying, it's about everyone. We've lost to suicide, those who've lost loved ones to suicide, those who are still here but struggling, but they're fighting for their life today. And that is going to be my biggest source of motivation. Yeah. And I'm doing it. It's a daily thing. I wake up every day, and if I can get out and keep on walking today, that's good. And I'm going to keep up that mentality, because that's what the whole trek is, like a physical depiction of what it's like to live with mental health. You get up on some days and you don't want to get up. You don't think you've got it in you. You think, what's the point? I can't keep going today. Why am I doing this? It's like, I can't do it. But if you take one tiny step, one small step, one at a time, you might be surprised that day. You'll see a little bit of beauty. You'll get reminded why you're here. And that's what it's like living with mental health.
You're always moving forward as well.
Yeah.
We were fortunate to interview Jordan Wiley a few months back, and then you came up to the 360 offices on the same day as Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about creating a tribe, don't we? A positive tribe.
I love hearing about that.
And you met Jordan and what have you. And talk to me about how that's inspired you as well. Just having somebody who's, one could say, as bonkers as you are in terms of
climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in barefoot.
Yeah,
so he doesn't think you're crazy, right? He's probably like, well, that's right.
So great.
Yeah.
It's origin.
So how's that relationship for you, sort of having Jordan in your tribe?
Oh, it's been amazing, and I think we got to drive back together, which was a 3.5 hour car journey, and just never a moment of pause or silence, just constant talking, and also just invaluable advice, and hearing someone whose mind is like mine, that this is the kind of thing that he loves doing because it's got a purpose and it's got a drive, and the kind of someone else who likes to step beyond the norm, I guess we could say, not that what is normal, and just instantly wanting to help as well, just instantly going, well, of course, like not no questions asked.
With, right?
Yeah.
Because instantly, like you mentioned about a whole load of food you can take that he already had. He can't wait to give that to you to be able to help. He's going to be a guy you can call on those tough, difficult days you're going to have, and he's going to know what to say.
Yeah. I think it was not even 30 seconds into, I mean, we'd followed each other on socials, but when I first got to you, we were looking around, and then he came and joined us, and we introduced, and then we realised we were from the same area. And he's like, oh, I'll sort you out. Like, no questions asked. Oh, yeah, I'll sort you out. I've got
Max, you're up in Lincoln, but you drove back to the next village in Winchester.
I witnessed that happen, and it was one of the most, we talk about introducing people to it, but it was one of the most joyful things, because that just went like that, didn't it?
Yeah.
It just meshed completely. And then you got Nick stood there who was also like, yep, okay. And then there's a part of this I want to relay, because the inspiration you give is incredible. And there was a group of 20 or 30 of our team, and there was Nick Hollis, been there, done it, bought the T-shirt. There was Jordan, who is out of this world, And then you spoke, and I looked at those two. And this is where you won't have seen or felt that, but I want you to feel this. Two incredibly accomplished people who've had their own struggles, their own demons to overcome, and their own challenges, stood there in awe of that young lady that was talking about who she was and what she'd done. And I think it's all too easy to lose sight that you can have an impact on people, some people quite easily. I think some people have been on a similar journey and have roughed it out, toughed it out, given empathy that is unqualifiable. And I looked at the empathy from these two huge titans of exploration, and they were looking at you in awe. And that was a day I'll never forget. And I want you to recognize how proud you should be of the effect you had on two titans of exploration, because they were in awe of you. Yeah. And when you're writing about mice in a bluebell wood, or you're planning to explore the longest walk in Europe, you're an incredibly inspirational purpose. And your darkness has a place in your life, but your darkness almost illuminates the lighter part, doesn't it? There's a converse relationship there. I don't know how the science would ever correlate with that, but it was powerful. It really was. And as we know, I've done some work with your dad, and I think when your dad watches this back, he'll be that proud as well. And I'm telling you that with such sincerity, because you've been on such a journey of doubting yourself, that all that context that you've given us so articulately, so beautifully, never lose sight of what you bring and what your next step will give you. So, there are days on that walk, there'll be days when you don't want to walk, won't there? There are days in your life when you've not wanted to get up. But every next day for you will have an impact on other people. And I can't get over the impact you've had on me today.
I couldn't wait to be here for this. And I'm really glad you brought her dad up, because I'm a dad of 13 and 15-year-old daughters. And one of the things that I really wanted to ask you is, you've articulated beautifully how when God asked you, you were at the bottom, what got you out, and you talked through that. So many people don't look at the people around people that are suffering and perhaps not able to articulate at the time, particularly, and show their vulnerability and their feelings. What advice would you give to parents around children growing up, going through things you've gone through, and what kind of almost is the one thing they can do to help?
I think the biggest thing anybody can do, parents, friends, loved ones, stop trying to fix people and just be there to listen. I think the most powerful thing you can do for someone is just sit with them, listen to what they've got to say, and don't judge. And I think that is such an easy thing to say, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think when you're coming, especially from a parent's perspective,
you want to fix.
I'm
guilty of that.
You want to fix. You really, really want to fix. And I think a lot of the time, the sad thing is, I think especially with addiction, it's a self-diagnosed disease. I wasn't ready to be an addict until I was ready to be an addict, until I went somewhere and said, "Hi, I'm Kit and I'm an addict," and truly, truly believed that. You can tell someone so many times you've got a problem, but if they're not ready to stop, they're not going to. And I think it's really sad. And I don't know how to give someone advice for that. I truly don't, because I don't know anything else that anybody could have done around me. It's that I had to drive myself to my own rock bottom in order to believe that something needed to change. But I think just open conversations, I think now we speak about it very openly as a family, very openly. And it's because it doesn't have to be these big conversations, Before, growing up, because it was more taboo, it was, can we talk about this? And it was something that completely suffocated the room. It was big, it was serious. It's let's sit down and grab a cup of tea and let's talk about this. Where now it just has to be a passing conversation. How are you doing today? I think my bipolar is I feel like I might be on the edge of an episode, but I'm going to do X, Y, Z to pull me back. Or actually my ADHD, I'm feeling pretty overwhelmed today. Or just having more openness about it and being like, it doesn't need, because the more weight you put behind that, there's more link to shame, there's more link to guilt, there's more link to, this is something that we have to talk about in an environment that's, you know, formal, yeah. And that's what I'm wanting to do with this track, is to make it something we talk about, something we don't hide behind, something that you don't need to be ashamed of. This thing, it's like these labels and these diagnoses, they're amazing, but then they're not, they don't define you, they just help you understand yourself better. It's not like there's ADHD, bipolar me, drug addict me, whatever. It's just Kit.
Yeah.
And it's just, how can I understand myself better? These give me the tool to do so. How to manage it better. How for other people to understand me better. But it's still me, you know.
Brilliant.
So we're out of time, sadly. When you go on that walk, I've said this to you before and I'm going to say it again. If you don't ring me, I'll be upset. And I want you to ring me on the happy days as well as if you just want to talk to me. We're new to a friendship, but have me in your phone, and I'll come and see you on the walk as well. I said that last time. I'll come and see you. But absolutely, I'd love to be one of the people that you pick up the phone to, if you feel that's appropriate for you, because I think you're absolutely smashing it out the park. And I'm really proud to have you as a friend. Well done today. It's been brilliant.
Thank you.
Inspiration. Loved it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And good luck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for thinking.
Yeah, go and grab your bag of sand.
Yeah, better you than me. Thank you, Kit.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.